First of all, we had in the last year a great crisis, 2007 till now. But the coming out from the crisis is different. We can divide the world in three parts. Let's say United States, China, and even Africa are growing substantially. They get out of the crisis, of course, in a very different situation because United States is a wealthy country. Africa, even if it's growing better than in the past, is a real tragically poor continent, you know. But for the first time, because I worked for UN, for Africa, for the first time in the last 7-8 years, we have a waking up. Of course, many people talk about Africa Renaissance. Not true, because the country is still poor. And remember, to give you an idea of the poverty, even after 10 years of growth, the percentage of world GDP of Africa is the same that it was in 1980. So a lot of hope, but it's still a tragic situation. Then we have United States that are coming out from the crisis in a very strong way. Not politically, but economically. Politically, United States are different from one generation ago in the sense that after Iraqi war, Afghanistan, and so on, United States remain the most powerful, by far, the most powerful country in the world, but they cannot even more run the world alone. So it's a completely different world. From monopolar is becoming a multipolar world, even if there is a leading country. United States in the last years we had also a new event in economic terms for two main reasons. The American economy is growing much rapidly than any other wealthy countries, big wealthy country. We are around more than 3%, that for a wealthy country is a lot. And there are two main reasons. First of all, technology. In the last 10 years, the American products that went in the market, the number of software progress and so on, the revolution has been remarkable. But also an unexpected event, the shale gas and shale oil production. Look, many people have underestimated this, but it was an absolutely unforeseen event. If you think that United States are almost self-sufficient in energy, and they increased 5 million barrels per day of oil production in the last years. So and all industry, energy consuming is coming back from the Arab Gulf to the Mexican Gulf. You know, it's a reverse revolution. And so it's robust, even if the tension inside the country are big, and United States, as in the most part of the country of the world, the last generation was a generation of increasing differentiation in income. Let's say the difference between wealthy people and poor people is growing up over all the world. And not only United States, but even Europe. In all European states this happened, except some Scandinavian countries, and in the world Brazil. But even in China, even in the new world, there is this increasing gap. The reason, then we shall go on the reason later, but mainly The problem is that because of the ultra-liberal doctrine, you know, the level of taxation has always decreased, of maximum taxation has always decreased. And in all democracies, if you mention taxation, you lose elections. And this is a very simple statement, but absolutely important. Since Thatcher and Reagan, the mind of people have changed. And you don't, in the political debates everywhere, you don't anymore debate between the advantage of having higher services, welfare state, a more efficient welfare state, and higher taxation. Higher taxation is always wrong. This is the new gospel of the Western world, and this is absolutely important because it changes even more the distribution of income. Then the economy, another issue, the economy has become more and more dependent upon finance, and so clearly you have an increasing gap between wealthy and poor. And you know, this was absolutely undisputed in the political debate. What I'm surprised, I remember 35 years ago, I wrote an article about an Italian company in which there was a difference between the boss and the normal worker between 1 to 30. And I wrote that it was too much, you know, and I received hundreds of letters. Well, professor, you're right, you're right, you're right. Now the difference is 1 to 300, and nobody complains. This is part of the new economy. In the last 2 years, there is a new intellectual revolution. The symbol is a book written by a French economist called Piketty, The Capital in the 21st Century, in which clearly demonstrates is a nice book to read. It's 950 pages, so please don't read it, but read the summary of it, because it's very, very, very well done, in which all this world is under dispute, you know, under intellectual dispute. But till a couple of years ago, any government policy, any industrial policy, any fiscal policy was the symbol of evil, you know. Then, clearly, a new aspect of the world economy is China. This is absolutely the future of the world, because it's different from the other countries. 1.3 billion people, and you know, absolutely not only the rate of growth, because you will read in papers that China rate of growth is decreasing. It was 10%, now it's 7%. Remember that to grow 7% when you are a middle economy, a middle-level economy, is much more than 10% when you are a poor economy. You know, because, and the impact on the world is absolutely impressive. Is absolutely impressive, and China is now strongly growing in politics and in economy, which is the differentiation of this economy. Clearly, is different from the others because you have a socialist political structure and a completely capitalistic-based economy, more and more. Of course, you have still many government-owned companies, but more and more private. And the differentiation in the incomes is widely increasing. But the most important character of this economy is that in the only economy in the world history in which a country exports goods, people, technology and capital together. It never happened in the world history. And because of the dimension of the country, this will change in the future. If nothing new happens, of course, nobody is a prophet, you know, but when I analyze the situation, this will change the economic hierarchy of the world. And now we are entering in a new phase in which the Chinese companies are becoming global, are obliged to become global as the South Korean companies or Japanese companies did in the past, but with a different dimension of the economy. And so this is why I think that in the future they will have much, much more power. But it's quite interesting because there is a complete revolution in the economic life, but a permanence of the socialist system from the political point of view. If you read the last statement of the summit of the Communist Party, it's quite clear, you know. You have the list of all the economic reforms, and the last sentence is China is a socialist party in which the party is in power. It's absolutely clear that politically the idea is that if you want to have a complete change in a country, such a big country, you must have a strong political grip. This is the Chinese doctrine. As I don't know if you, I quote a famous in Italy Italian novel that is called The Leopard, the Gattopardi. In the revolution of Sicily, when Italy was united, the bourgeoisie that was conservative against the unification, you have a young conservative who becomes a strong supporter of the new wave. And when they ask why, he answers, it is a necessity that everything changes in order that nothing changes. You know, to have a revolution in order to stop the evolution. In China it's completely the reverse. The top remains strong in order that to provocate an increasing change in the society. And this is why it's so intriguing, so different from all other examples of growth. You know, clearly the problems are great. The corruption is very common. The new government policy is concentrated in fighting against corruption, and it's biting. You know, the sales of the luxury goods has decreased at 30% in the last years, because it was all bought by let's say grey money, let us call it, you know, in this way. And so this is the new, this is the big challenge. The second challenge is the difference among regions, among provinces. There is a difference between 1 to 5, from the poorest province to the wealthiest province. And the third challenge is, and that is the most difficult challenge, is that if you want to preserve growth in this situation, you must move from investment to consumption. You must move the internal consumption. But you cannot have higher consumption if you don't have a health system and a pension system. And this is the new Chinese challenge, is an internal challenge to move all the economy in the direction that will guarantee growth in the future. And then, you know, you have Russia. You know better Russia than me. Russia, is a strong country, but with quite a few important problems. The first one is demography, because, as you know, 145 million people that are deemed to decrease strongly in the next future. And in the last months, you have the price of oil. And this was absolutely unexpected. It was I mentioned the shale oil, because of that, the oil is decreasing in price over the world. But the decrease is impressive, 45% in few months. And today, the last price is $61 per barrel. 1 year ago, it was 115, around that. So you have the idea of, and because the budget of the producing oil companies is, of course, done with a much higher price, you have a complete change of the economic structure of the country. And if you have very few inhabitants and very low cost of production, like Saudi Arabia, well, you manage. When you have let's say, a vast population like Russia, you have much bigger problem, much deeper problem than you have in other cases. You could ask me why the price of oil is going down without a reaction of the producing countries to decrease the production in order to keep the price high. This is also a mystery also for me, because Saudi Arabia decided not to decrease production. The big oil producers, they had no agreement among them, and so the forecasts are that this low price of oil will go on and probably will endure for a substantial number of years. So the revolution that we had in the last months, it's probably a revolution that will go on at least for a couple of years. Simply, I don't know, because to make forecast in this field is difficult. I simply remember you that in the oil crisis of the 80s and of the 90s, in both cases, it went on for more than 2 years. So I simply tell you what happened. I don't know what will happen in the future, but to give you that is a serious problem that is heavily important for you, for your neighbor, and for all Europe. Then the last event in the international policy that is really a new event is the diffused terrorism with a territorial structure. Let's say we always had terrorism. If you think to the Twin Towers in the United States, but we never have a terrorist so strong to build up a state. Now we have it between Iraq and Syria, but there are at least 2 other places in which, I hope not, but there are the precondition to have it. Let's say Sinai in Egypt, in which the tension is very high, and south of Libya and Algeria in the area of sub-Saharan area. In all these cases, you have weapons, you have young people going there, and I mention that because I think that this is the most important event that had the possibility to unite the policy of the great powers. The only, let's say, common fear that I found when let's say, I'm in China or Russia or United States, is against terrorism. When I was, to give you how deep is it. When I was representative of United Nations in Sahel, I went. I visited all the capitals, for this job, and terrorism was clear on the table, and all were united, were in favor of the French reaction against the terrorists from the north in Mali. And except in Egypt, it was the time of the Muslim Brothers government, who told, no, this is a colonial war, I don't agree, But then, in the end of the meeting, they asked me, Professor, do you think that the terrorism of Sahel can arrive to Sinai? So he was, let's say, understanding that in spite of the differentiation, this was a new danger that was in some way uniting all the world policy. Clearly, in the tension that we had created in the last months, will not be easy to organize this action against terrorism. Also because you have many countries that are in agreement of that, but very few are disposed to take action on that. Also because, as I mentioned in the beginning of my conversation, I repeat, for example, United States is a very strong country, but after the experience of Iraq and of Afghanistan, nobody will accept to receive dead bodies from a war. Neither the Democrats nor the Republicans. So that somebody talks, but the reality is that in this moment it's the popular feeling is that any type of war will be unbearable. I mean people with the boots, clearly is different when you use drones or bombing or that, but clearly this new type of weapons are not decisive in the strategy of any conflict. So this is the picture of the world. I didn't mention Europe by purpose. Why I didn't mention Europe? Because if you list the problem of the great power, Europe is not mentioned, because it's a different type of organization for good. I think more from good than for evil, but it's different in the terms that in terms of economy is a giant. In spite of what you can read, Europe is number one in the world GDP, number one in industrial production, number one in exports. Maybe in 10 years will be China, but now it's still Europe, And Europe has really been the great laboratory of the contemporary politics in the world. To put together so many states, so many nations that have always been in war among them has been really a fantastic achievement. If you think that never, after the 5th century, after Christ, we had a European generation without a war. Never. And we have already 3 generations without a war. And just out of Europe, we had the Yugoslavian conflict. And, this is the evidence that Europe worked well, you know. Of course, it worked well also because the terrible experience of the two world wars with dozens of millions of people dead, you know. But then, you know, and it was a body able to grow. 6 countries in the beginning, then 9, then 12, then 10 years ago when I was president of the Commission, after the fall of the Iron Curtain, 10 new countries, 8 from the former Iron Curtain area, and 2, Cyprus and Malta, small countries from the West. And, you know, this was, I think, a fantastic achievement, you know, also because not only it was done in a peaceful way, but also because, and now 2 other countries went later, Romania and Bulgaria, but also because it worked well. Let's say the growth of the peripheral states, it was higher than the growth of let's say the previous member state like Germany or France or Italy or that, you know. And this was a period of really great European achievements, you know, not only the enlargement but complete common market, no barrier, free circulation of manpower, all the achievements that were a dream before. But in the last years, the European situation has become much more difficult for one main reason, the economic crisis and the difficulty to found a common policy against the crisis. The situation of different views among the 28 countries has made impossible a reaction, as United States did and China did. When the crisis started, what Obama has done, he has put in the economy $800 billion in one shot. Boom. China, $595 billion. Let's say 4 trillion renminbi, you know, to say in the original currency. And this, in one shot, have completely blocked the crisis and made, let's say, a start-up or new way. In Europe, we found Europe in a moment of fear, of political fear. Fear of what? Fear of the new populistic parties that were against the European Union, fear, and also the fear of the change, political change that we have in Europe. You know, Europe 6 years ago, 7 years ago, or 10 years ago, let's say, when I was president of the Commission, was balanced in terms of power. Germany, France, and UK, in some way leading Europe, you know, especially the Franco-German engine. It was called an engine with 2 pistons, you know, one that was giving a political strength, France, and one the economic strength, Germany. And this was in some way a balanced Europe. But then we had new events, even this unforeseen. The British Prime Minister, he told, look, because of the populistic party increase in UK, we shall have a referendum whether to be member of Europe or not. And this has put UK in a much weaker position in Europe, because if you are a member of a club, of course, you don't find the protection of a president or of a member who will go out of the club in few years. And so we had all the so-called balancing countries, let's say Sweden, Poland, Czech Republic, Baltic states, that were politically balancing themselves between UK, Germany and France because of the increased weakness of the French and the British decision. They have all balanced vis-à-vis Germany. And now in Europe you have a different set of power. Germany, that is dictating the rule, and the other countries that are unable to prepare alternative. Why this is important, because Germany is powerful not because of its vices, but because of its virtues. It's a fantastic economic system, politically balanced, but with the economic doctrine that is all against inflation, for an absolutely, let's say, a budget without any deficit, and with a type of doctrine that was the heritage of the past inflation, so politically rooted inside Germany. So you have a European policy that is dictated by these rules, and so the reaction against the crisis was not strong as it was in the United States or in China or in other countries. And the result is that many peripheral European states are suffering. Peripheral states, I mentioned Italy, my country, Spain, Greece, even more Greece, but also France. But the most part of the countries, in spite of that, they do agree for a budget discipline, and so now we still have a perspective of a Europe that still debating this problem, but with difficulty to take the decision. And so I don't think, honestly, that, I absolutely don't think that Europe will collapse. I don't think that the currency will go, but I understand that as it happened in the past quite a few times, we had many crises. For example, what was called the crisis of the empty chair, in which France abandoned the place in which the decisions were taken. So I'm not worried of European collapse, but I am worried of the possibility of taking decisions, quick decisions against the crises that are difficult now to be taken. And so this is the situation in which we live now in Europe, and even more clearly, it's when you examine politically the situation, there is also another change. Very nobody gives attention to it, but in the past you had a special relation between United Kingdom and United States for historical reasons, so and so on. But now the American president does not even more call by telephone the British Prime Minister. He called the German Chancellor, and so also politically you have a new event in Europe. This has been the change of the last years. And of course, when you have this change, the adaptation, to find the new rules of the policy become a very difficult effort. But in spite of that, I repeat, I do think that the innovation of the European policy are still there. When I think that the two pillars of the modern state have always been the army and the currency. And one of the two pillars now is not anymore national, is shared. So when you have this change, you must not be surprised of the difficulties that you have in front of you, of the necessity to adapt all the institutions. Centuries of history are changing. We are changing centuries of history. But the result has been a fantastic growth, peace, free circulation of people, human rights respected, and so it's. I think that this was a fantastic achievement. Certainly, I never underestimate the problem that we have in front of us. When I explained it to my Chinese students, all that, as I am doing now, very simply with you. And I was telling that it has been the most impressive laboratory of innovation in the world politics, and now we are in such a difficult situation. One student stood up and told me, "Look, professor, but you told that Europe has been the biggest laboratory, but now Europe is a laboratory or a museum?" And this was a question that has entered in my heart, because I do think that we can give the impression to be, let's say, under stress that paralyzes us, but is a crisis of growth, is a crisis of change. 2 years ago, somebody could even think that the euro could fall apart. Now, at least in this moment, nobody will think is thinking that, and I do think that working together we shall overcome the difficulties. The new Commission has started a change, not in quantity sufficient, but a change of direction, telling that for the new generation, employment and growth is more important than stability and fighting against inflation. The central bank is working in this direction, and I do see this movement. Clearly, when you have, I repeat, to such an innovative change, you cannot be surprised that the speed is not the speed that we should like to have. But I think that we started to go in the right direction, and I do expect that in the future we shall get good results. Last point, very short. This area, Ukraine, has been a battlefield in the last months. I think that this is a very serious problem. I always thought that Ukraine is a bridge between Europe and Russia. I think that Ukraine cannot be Russian and cannot be European. I think that the national identity of Ukraine must be preserved with all the necessary autonomies that we found in Europe in many cases. We had so many similar problems of minorities in Europe, but the greatness of Europe is the respect of minority. When in the period of enlargement, I remember I went to Romania to start the negotiation with entering, And in the Romanian parliament, all the parties were speaking, almost all in favor of entering into the European Union. Then in the end, a very impressive guy with a long beard, he defined himself member of the non-Hungarian minority of the Romanian parliament. Look at the complexity of these ethnic problems in Europe, and he made a speech, a strong speech in favor of Europe. So I stopped him and said, "Why you are so warm?" And he simply told me, "Look, Professor, my grandfather was killed because was member of a minority. My father was sent in exile because was member of a minority. And I want that my country will be member of European Union because Europe is a union of minorities." This is the best definition of Europe, and this is why I'm so let's say, decisive in stressing the importance of finding new equilibrium in Europe, because Europe is a union of minorities, and this is why it has been open to new countries, why I think must be open to cooperation with neighbor countries. And when I left the Commission, I proposed an institution that I defined the Ring of Friends, or everything but institutions, but the popular name was Ring of Friends, telling that all the countries neighbor to Europe, from Belarus to Morocco, Ukraine, even Georgia, they could, one by one, with a bilateral agreement, if they want, to have agreements with the European Union, culture, trade, technological aspect, agriculture, in order, step by step, to build in 1 or 2 generations this mixing up, this, without being member of the Union, because I think that because of intellectual problems, you must have cautious country also, but be open. And the crisis and also the political division stopped it, but I still dream that, also because I do think, and this is the last statement, that as an economist, and also as a politician, there is nothing that will forbid us to find step by step, in due time, in 20 years, an agreement between the Trade Association of Belarus, Russia, and Kazakhstan with the European Union. Clearly, you cannot do in one shot. But if you have the political idea of peace, of progress, of each country keeps its own identity, but opening himself to new relations. This is, of course, the Europe I dream. This year we didn't make progress in this direction. This year we went back, but I still insist that because of the future of your generation, we must fight for a Europe that in which relations and peace are dominating over conflicts and sorrows. Thank you.